I like to create interesting, character-driven images. Learning how to build better composites meant that I had to go back out into the wild and photograph everything on location. I had to immerse myself in the environments to better understand how to create the images that were in my head. But what happens when we can't go out into the world? What happens when our locations are too lofty, too far, or they just don't exist? We have to bring the world to us, and digital art is how we make that happen. Growing up around a ranching family gave me an appreciation for the rural aesthetic, and an opportunity to photograph my dad kind of unlocked these visual styles for me. My name is Renée Robyn, and welcome to my Introduction to Character Composites class. In this class, hang out with me while we take an image that was shot in the studio and transport it into a rainy desert location. We're going to break down the lighting, masking techniques, create realistic atmosphere in rain, and have the rain interacting with the costume itself, and finally color grade this image for an eye-catching shot. Don't let your location limit your creativity. Composite photography is the key to your imagination.
Hi, and welcome to Creative Live. I am your host today, Kate Dessa, and I am super excited to be introducing our newest class, Intro to Character Composites with Renée Robyn. And I'm so excited for Renée to join us for this live kickoff today. So while we're getting connected with Renée, tell us where you're tuning in from and let us know if you're going to be watching the class today with us. So without further ado, welcome to the stream, Renée. Excited to have you here.
Yeah, it's good to be back. It's always fun to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about, well, first, tell us where you're joining us from. Let's get a little intro into you, Renée. I know, this class, you are using your dad as a model and inspiration. So tell us a little bit about where you're from and where this class takes place.
Yeah, so I'm from Alberta, Northern Alberta, and we shot this class in Edmonton, Alberta. So,
All
yeah.
right. So this is, and just as a reminder to everyone, this is Intro to Character Composites, and Renée recently had another new class about creating fantasy composites. Renée, how do these two classes differ a little bit, and what goes into creating character composites for you?
Yeah, so the difference between fantasy and character composites is a lot of it is on the styling side of it. A lot of it is on like the story that you want to be telling in the image. Fantasy is something that doesn't exist, hence fantasy. So we're making something that is surreal. We're making something that is, beautiful or fantastical or whatever, but it's not based in reality at all. Whereas character composites, these are, portraits of people who can exist either, historically or in modern times. So that's the difference for me. And then on the compositing end of it, of course, the masking is similar but different. You're taking into different considerations for the types of backgrounds that you're going to be choosing. But the biggest difference here is with the character composite, where you're making rain from scratch and we're having it interacting with the costume itself, which is a big, long, intensive process.
Yeah, that looked like the most intricate part of the class, definitely.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, I know this class, you originally used your dad as a model, and you were taking some photos of your dad, who is a farmer, and you live out on a farm with him, I know. And
I used to, yeah. I mean, I've been moved out now for a long time. I'm
gotcha.
I'm much older than that. It would be super weird if I still lived at home.
Dad still, and we wouldn't think you were anything.
He would have thrown me out.
So tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind this portrait.
Yeah, so I had a friend of mine come over from the UK, and so Clinton Lofthouse, and he was here, and he was just, when I go to the UK and I hang out with Clinton, I'm like, let's go see ruins, let's go see old churches, let's go do all this stuff. And so he came here to Canada because he was speaking at an event, and he was like, I want to photograph cowboys, and he's like, do you happen to know any? And I was like, actually, funny that I do. It's like, my whole family on, like our farmers or ranchers of some kind, and they all come from that background. So I was like, yeah, actually. So I just called up my dad and I was like, hey, do you feel like, getting your photo taken a bunch today? And like, if we brought like in a film, like, film crew or something and we took like some behind the scenes, would that be cool? And he was like, yeah, sure, whatever. So he came and like brought his whole like tickle trunk full of stuff. And, until that point, like I'd never thought about photographing my dad, which is kind of weird. Like lots of people, like their family is like the focus of who they
Yeah.
photograph. And I'd never considered it before, which makes me feel like a bit of a jerk. And so when I took these photographs, I was like, oh yeah, like this is awesome. And this is like, I love these portraits of him. And I was like, man, it'd be really cool if I could do this again. But, keep in mind that I want to do it as a composite. So we set up the shoot again, and I had a different model this time. His name's Curtis. Come in, and we just did a bunch of portraits with him. And again, same thing, lots of really great stuff. I borrowed a bunch of my dad's costuming and stuff, and then thus this class was done. This class was formed.
Nice. And tell me a little bit about what did it feel like shooting your dad and like, model, you're setting your dad up as a model. It's, like you said, you've never thought about shooting your dad before. So what was the feeling of kind of crossing that boundary and now all of a sudden, using your dad as a model?
Yeah, I mean, it was different because I mean, I have photographed my sister extensively before, but that's about it, right?
Yeah.
So it was definitely weird crossing that barrier because I just never thought of it before, and then it just kind of was like, well, why haven't I thought of this before? But I just hadn't. Yeah, it was definitely a different experience. So I'm glad he trusted me.
Yeah.
I'm glad he let me take those photos, because I think that I probably should have been doing this with my parents before now. Like I kind of feel like that's like a bit of a missed opportunity that like we hadn't done this earlier.
Especially because
So
your dad has such cool, like, outfits, like farming and ranching. Actually, like most parents don't have built-in like costumes. My dad worked for a bank. That wouldn't be very fun to photograph. Your
yeah.
dad actually has like really cool props that come along with his job.
Yeah, well, I mean, so years ago when I was first getting into photography, my dad is also a biker, so he likes to go down to like Sturgis and stuff like that. And so
Yeah.
he had this gigantic Honda cruiser. This I don't even remember the name of it anymore, but it was just like massive and this like huge leather fairing and studs everywhere and stuff like that. And I was like, early in my career, I was like, oh my God, like I want to do a composite with that. So I photographed him then, but not like since then, and not in the aspect of both of those aspects of his life are really important to him. He'd spent a lot of time doing both of those things. So, yeah, I don't know, it was just kind of funny to have not thought about it sooner.
Totally. So, well, since we talked about the photo, we're going to play a little video. This is lesson 2 from the class, which is going to go into a little bit about lighting and just how you kind of concepted this out. And just as a reminder to everybody who's just tuning in, you're watching the live kickoff with Renée Robyn. This is her brand new class that comes out today, and it is called Intro to Character Compositing. And right after this stream, the class will kick off, and you can watch it free for 24 hours. So make sure you click the links that are in the captions and head over to the class after we're done with this live stream. So let's watch lesson 2 and see your dad come to life, and then bringing these this photo to life.
So I come from a family of ranchers and small farmers, and the concept for this shoot came from having the opportunity to photograph my dad in the studio. My dad has a very unique collection of clothing and costuming and styling, and after seeing the photos that I got of him, I was really inspired to try and make something again, but with the intention of turning them into composites. So I was in the studio and I photographed this with a beauty dish on a boom stand. So I just had my really old alien bees at the time and a beauty dish with a diffused sock on top of it. And I just brought the boom stand out over in the middle of the cyc wall. And I made sure it was far enough away from the subject so that the lighting wasn't going to affect the background. I didn't want a pure white background. And then for costuming, I basically borrowed a bunch of my dad's stuff. I borrowed his lasso, chaps, jackets, hats, saddlebags, basically all the stuff that I'd known him to have most of my life, and I put it on a model, and we shot it in the studio and kind of just tried to see how it would all come together. I did shoot everything tethered with my Canon 5D Mark III, my 135mm prime lens, shot tethered to Capture One on my computer. So I do this all the time when I'm shooting in the studio. I make sure that I'm shooting tethered so that I can see every single shot that comes up and make sure that I'm not missing anything important. So this is the overview shot of the lighting setup for the entire space in the studio. This is the image that I shot straight at a camera, so you can see the lighting coming down from the direction, and because we're far enough away, the background isn't blown out pure white, and I'm actually getting a little bit of reflection off the white ground to the lasso on the bottom, which is filling in some of the shadows. And this is the final composite, and we're going to walk through this whole thing step by step. I'm going to show you how we took this image from being shot in the studio and make this awesome composite in post.
All right, so that was lesson 2 from Renee's class that is going to be live streaming starting at 9:30 PST. And that is a little sneak peek of what you'll learn in the class. It shows you a little bit about the concept of this photo, and then goes into a little bit of lighting. So before I ask you a few questions that are coming in, Renee, I want to say hi to everyone that is joining us from around the world. We have George from Singapore, Mark from Ireland. Let's see, Alabama in the house. We have Los Angeles, Romania, Scotland. So many worldwide people joining in today. So really fun to see, and I bet you people are really interested in this style of photography with our worldwide audience. So Renee, tell us a little bit about, you shot this with your dad and then you had a model. What was the difference in shooting the shot with your dad and then kind of reconcepting it with a model and then bringing in all the lights, and what kind of went into the vision before you started compositing, excuse me?
So the photo of my dad, I just planned on just being like a photo of my dad, just like, how do I like make this guy that I've known my entire life look pretty cool, like he's got the outfit on, he's got the duster, and like, how do I just like make that look like a cool photo of my dad? Whereas with Curtis, I was just like, well, what if I wanted to take this and turn this into like graphic novel style of imagery? So I shot like a bunch of different styles of lighting with the other set. I didn't include them in the class because I thought it would just be kind of confusing as to like, which one and why and so forth. But this one was like my favorite one out of the entire series, where it kind of worked out. And the lighting is similar-ish to what I had done with my dad, just because I found it to be like really effective, but I wanted it to still be lit better for a composite, whereas with my dad it was quite a narrow beam of light, and it's literally just like photo of the guy, nothing else in the image. So yeah, it was and with people who are experienced being in front of the camera, there's a lot of back and forth and like energy and ideas and so on and so forth. Working with my dad doesn't really get in front of the camera too often, even though he's definitely exhibitionist isn't the right word, but doesn't mind being the front and center of attention. So that does help a little bit.
Great. He looks like he could be a farming model if he wants to add another thing to his resume.
Yeah, I had when I first posted the photos of my dad, someone was like, "You didn't tell me that your dad hung out with Clint Eastwood."
Yeah, totally channels that. So tell me, you went from this photo of your dad to this shooting with Curtis, and ahead of shooting with Curtis, were you? Did you have the kind of background in your head of where you wanted to place Curtis, or do you often kind of discover what the background or what the composite's going to be after you take the shot?
Yeah, so strangely enough, so you'll see in the video I'm blonde, and that's because we shot and filmed all this stuff pre-COVID. And I didn't really know what I was going to do with it. I was just like, oh, we have this video footage, like whatever. It's just going to sit on a hard drive. And then when the opportunity came up to do a class on character composites, I was like, oh man, like which files could I use? And so I started digging through my hard drives, and I came across this one of Curtis again. And ironically, I had edited this image before, but differently, and it never really sat right with me. And pre-lockdown, like just before lockdown, I was in Nevada, and I had photographed the most incredible storm coming through Red Rocks Canyon. And I was sitting there and I was like, oh my God, that's it. Like, that's what this image has been missing, because the other one, the composite, just like, it didn't connect, right? Like the story was just kind of average. It felt lazy. And so when the opportunity came up to do this, I was like, oh man, yeah, those images from Red Rocks would be like absolutely perfect, because it gives a reason for the jacket, right? It gives a reason for like the extra layers. Like I can't put this into an arid environment, because why would you be wearing like a heavy oil slick jacket? And like, why would you be carrying all of your gear, right? So in this case, if he's carrying all of his stuff, like, and I put this rainy background into it, and then I get the rain going and everything, then all of a sudden, everything that he has on him has a purpose. And so I don't always shoot in mind with a purpose right away. I'll shoot for options. So the original session, there's like a bunch of different clothes and different costumes and different styles, just to be like, to give future me, a year later, like, oh, here's the options of what you're looking for. Like, this is the shot the shot was good, that stood out to you right away, but the background itself, the first one was really lackluster. And so this one, I think it feels right this time. And so I'm glad I was able to do that in an environment where I get to share like the rambly thoughts and process of making stuff with people.
Well, everyone wants to understand what's going on in that mind, Renee. Like everyone,
it's just like a honey badger on a wheel, and it's angry and it's just going around at full speed.
Well, I think everyone's really excited to get a little bit of that high speed hamster wheel in this class.
It should be a hamster, but it's definitely a honey badger. It's a little angry.
Excuse me. Well, kind of to follow up with that question, we have a question from somebody with the handle of Photo Maker. Hi there, Photo Maker. And he wants to know, or he or she wants to know, do you, in this specific composite, you kind of went backwards, but do you ever sketch out or storyboard your composites ahead of time when you're going into shoots, or is this kind of the process? Do you take something and then kind of figure out what it's going to be after the fact, or do you kind of play around with both?
All of the above. So if you go onto my YouTube channel or to my blog, you're going to see a thing, actually some of the intro video from this class with the horses and the snow and everything. Pardon me, that's from a project called For Love of Horses. And that one was storyboarded like absolutely piece by piece by piece by piece. And then nature dumped a bunch of snow on us and threw all of our storyboarding out. So we worked on that for 4 years and, had everything like perfectly storyboarded, like, yeah, these shots are going to be awesome. And then nature was just like, surprise. And we couldn't do anything that we storyboarded. But storyboarding does make your work faster, more seamless, more effective. But definitely I've learned to just like be really easy at like doing both. So if I'm working with a team, like let's say I'm doing agency work or something, then obviously everything has to be storyboarded and approved ahead of time, and then you have to shoot to that brief. But when it's personal work, sometimes I storyboard and sometimes I'm just like throwing glitter, just like, let's just see what happens. I don't know. We'll just show up.
That's from my perspective, that's like one of the funnest parts of being a composite artist, is that you ultimately can just play, and then you have no idea when that playful thing you did is actually going to be useful. And like this year for you, I assume, given constraints of COVID and the pandemic, you got to go back into old photos that you played with and use them in all new ways. And I think that's one of the coolest parts about compositing, is like you can just go have fun, and then you never know how that shoot or that random shot you saw of somebody walking by is going to be used in the future. Just like, and I think the pandemic has probably allowed you to explore with a lot of your old work in ways you haven't before.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I love compositing, is that I find that, the best part, at least for me, being creative comes from like within, in here, way in the back. So like I while I
From the
love
honey
photography and
badger.
I love shooting, when I actually get really creative is, between 10 p.m. and 4 in the morning, when the world is quiet, like everything gets calm, and I can just like sit down on the computer, put some headphones in, and just like explore within myself while like trawling hard drives and just being like, okay, what's speaking to me today? And then just wait for this thing, like just like running my fingers through, like long hair, and just being like, oh, there's a piece, like I love this, right? And then like run your fingers through, and then like, oh, there's another piece, and oh, they fit together, isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
And then kind of going from there. So it is, like I said, it's a little bit it's like kind of like walking around through like smoke or fog at night, and you can't really quite see something, and then you like your hand touches something and you're like, yes, that's the thing I've been looking for. That's kind of
Yeah,
what it feels like for me.
totally. And, when you're out and about just shooting, are you often, shooting backdrops that, maybe you'll use one day and people, or, often your shots, especially with characters and people, feel more like portrait shots that you then
Mhm.
are finding an old background, or maybe you've storyboarded it and you're going out and taking the background. But are you also, just being a photographer and taking photos and then finding ways down the line that you're like, oh, that guy that I took a shot of, that, it wasn't a studio shot, but I can drop him in this in some unique way. You know, as a you do so much as a photographer, and I would love to get into your head of, if you're just kind of snapping shots and finding a spot for them where they work, or if, when it comes to people, if it's always a portrait that you then, might create the story after the fact.
Right. Yeah. So when it comes, so I'm out photographing backplates all the time. So, and I
Yeah.
do that,
Okay.
like, I mean, pre 2020, I was traveling a lot, like photographing all those backplates because I love being able to photograph my own stuff.
Yeah.
But when it comes to people, I definitely really dig deep into character creation. So I'll find someone or cast someone or just like bump into someone and be like, oh my God, I can turn you into something. There's a photographer, his name is Ray. And if you go on my website, you're going to see this guy, and he looks like Santa. We actually made him Santa in one image, and we made him Gandalf in another image. He's got
That's
this
awesome.
amazing beard. And the first time I met him was at a photo conference, and I was like, your beard is amazing. And there was like all these models everywhere, of like young, pretty, whatever. And I was like, give me this dude. I was like, I got a sheet. He's got like a sword in his truck for some reason. Like, this is gonna be awesome. And like
That's
that's
awesome.
how, like, that, like the character creation for me is actually one of the most interesting parts, is I look at someone not for what they are, but for what they can be. And
Yeah.
that's the same thing when I look at composites and everything else, is it's like I'm not seeing it for like the literal what it is, which makes me a terrible documentary photographer. Like I'm really bad. But that's what I love about compositing, is like it's looking at this like basically a blank canvas of a person and a studio shot, and just being like, okay, where do we want to go today?
Yeah. And that's it probably allows you to connect with the subject in a totally different way than a portrait or documentary photographer, because you're seeing something that they probably have never envisioned themselves
Yeah.
as. And
Yes,
that's
that's super
probably just
fun.
a really cool way to connect with a person. And that's what photography is. And, I imagine you have a lot of fun bringing out things in people that they didn't even know they had inside them.
It's my favorite thing. It's my
Yeah.
favorite thing. I mean, most of my personal clients that I get, they'll come to me and they're just like, I just want to be something different.
Yeah.
And they're just like, turn me into something. And you're just like, okay. And then you start like data mining them a little bit on like, things that they like, and like things that maybe they didn't even know that they liked. And then you just like turn them into something else, and they look at the photo of themselves and they're just like, oh my God, that's me. Like, oh my
Yeah.
God, that's me. I can't believe that's me. I just did a shoot with a girl last week. And I shoot tethered to the computer so they can see the photos popping up, and they're just like, she's just gasping, she's just like, oh my God, I can't believe that's me. And I'm like, dude, this is totally you, and I love it.
Yeah.
The best.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, next time you're in Nevada, let me know. I live in Nevada, and I would love for you to turn me into some
Deal.
creation.
I got you.
All right. We have lots of questions coming in. Everyone's really excited for the class. Again, Renee's new class will be starting here at 9:30 PST. We're just doing a live kickoff with Renee and taking a few questions before the class starts, and it will be Intro to Character Compositing, so make sure you head over to the class after this live stream. It will be available for free for 24 hours. So a couple more questions before we let you go, Renee. Marcelo wants to know, do you have a go-to lens for your compositing projects? And does the lens make a difference once you get into post-processing?
It super makes a difference. It definitely makes a difference. So I used to shoot a lot of my studio composites like 8 years ago on a 50 mil prime lens, and it's a super good lens, and I love it. And then it depends also on the type of composite that you want to make. So sometimes you want to shoot with a wide angle lens to get a certain effect. So like if you want to exaggerate motion or exaggerate emotion, a wide angle lens is a really good tool to use that. But a couple of years ago, actually, since that horse project shoot, which is in part of the trailer, I rented a Sigma 70-200 Sport, and I was like, holy crap, this lens is amazing. It's super sharp and it's super durable. And I just love that lens. And so I shoot most of my composites now, but I have a big studio that I use. So I stand, I mean, especially these days, I stand like 45 feet away from my subject. Wow. And I usually shoot around 70 mil. And but in this case here with this image, I shot him on a 135 mil lens, like nice and compressed, and then the background image is at 200. So there's a little bit of difference in the compression, but it just makes the mountains look bigger. So it's like, it's kind of complementary, I think.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, I mean, I've shot composites with like all the lenses all the time. Even like my 24-105, sometimes I'll use it. But I've definitely been a little addicted to my 70-200. And I was a prime snob for years. I was such a prime snob. But yeah, no, that 70-200 is actually pretty awesome.
Good to know. And so we have one more question before we let you go. Do you use your own studio space, or do you rent one?
No, I rent studio spaces. Typically because pre-2020 I was traveling a lot, and there was no point of having my own space. So I did have a space that was my own, and I got rid of it because I was like, why am I spending all this money every month when I'm never there to use it or to manage it or whatever? So yeah, and I find that renting a space gives me a little bit more flexibility if I want to change it up, if I want to have a different look. So because every single studio that you shoot in is going to have a different quality of light, and so you can change things up.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Renee. Well, give us just a couple lines about where we can follow you, why everyone should take this class, because you're going to make, well, I know you're going to make really cool composites out of it, and everyone is going to be like, holy crap, that's me. But tell us where we can follow you, keep up to date on what you're doing, and tell us one line about why you should watch this class.
Okay, well, you can find me on my website, reneerobyn.com. It used to be Renée Robyn Photography, but the photography part has been taken off. So it's reneerobyn.com. Make sure you update everything on that end. Instagram is at Renée Robyn Photography. I'm learning TikTok at Renée Robyn Photo. Same thing with Twitter. I'm working on it. I'm feeling like 20 years too old for it. Yeah, I mean, like the people who want to take this class, I mean, if you just want to, even if you're not a compositor, like try something that is a little bit outside of your realm. So, I mean, I rebuilt part of my process making this image because so many of my composites involve like hand painting texture onto images. That, you know, this is a really nice opportunity to kind of share how I like to do that. And it really goes into a lot of the detail on, you know, the difference between just like slapping a texture on and what it's like to actually paint it on, so that when you print it, there aren't like these obvious like, oh yeah, that's a texture that was just like overlaid onto the image. So yeah, there's a lot of like paying attention to pixel level stuff. So if that's your thing, maybe you will enjoy this. I hope you will, because yeah, I spent a lot of time working on this one.
Yeah, it's an amazing class, and now it is about to start. So thank you everyone for tuning in to our live kickoff with Renee. And now head over to the class Intro to Creating Composites, Character Composites. It's starting in just a couple minutes. Just make sure to refresh your page if you're watching on the course page. Thanks everyone.
Thank you for hanging out. Thanks for having me.
Pursuing creativity is arguably the most practical thing that you can do.
We humans are adaptation champions. That's what makes us human, our ability to imagine.
The hard part is to look inside and say, what are my invisible beliefs that I have about money? I wanted to figure out how it actually worked.
And you are really here because you became passionate about an idea.
What does it take to capture great photographs of birds? You have to be grounded in your cameras. You need to understand the technology.
Just like any band shoot, we're looking to capture great shots of the band themselves playing on stage. So the drummer shot, lead singer, guitars.
How do you even prepare to shoot with your phone? And then we're actually going to go into the edit.
Once you hit rock bottom, there's no place to go but up. You learn what's real. You learn what's needed.
In astrophotography, there is a great deal more planning involved because you are literally shooting in the dark.
We can't change others, but we can change our perspective.
Wow, that's a good way to start the day.
I had tears in my eyes.
If you're feeling isolated and looking for creative connection, try tuning into creativelive.com/TV. That's where we've got a 24/7 live stream from the kitchen counters.
I can do that backlit shot that I really like to do.
From the studios and living rooms of many of the world's top creators, where we're doing musical performances, Q&As, cooking shows, virtual book tour events, drawing, spoken word poetry, and more.
Life passed me by waiting for an invitation when the world is greater than my nation or my occupation. Be someone you've never been. You feel all that adrenaline, it's medicine.
It actually helps me feel like my days are more purposeful.
I hope that out of this deep pain will come some collective growth.
Dive into Creative Live TV today.